Good evening, everyone. We are in the book of Ruth, and we are continuing on from yesterday in chapter 1. Just a brief recap so that we can dovetail into our main topic for this evening is that this was a book that is narrated on a story during the time of the judges. And so we can see that it was at the tail end of the judges, uh, before the kings came into play, or before Samuel was introduced in the book of First Samuel. And so this whole episode has that background. There was a famine, and Elimelech, for some reason, he and the wife left Judah and also his two sons, and he went to Moab. Moab is at the eastern shore of the Jordan River, and we're not told why he did that. Of course, there are a lot of speculation and commentating regarding maybe he has done something wrong, or maybe he's leaving, but something is driving him away. And we are also seeing that not everybody has left with him. It was only him and his particular family. Now, eventually, Elimelech died, and this is a very sad story in the sense that when a man dies, the woman is alone. So Naomi is alone, and she was left with just her two sons. Thereafter, these two sons took wives of the women of Moab, which means that the wives were not Israelites, not from Judah as well. And one was Orpah, and the other is Ruth. And they stayed on for about 10 years. So between the two sons, the daughters-in-law, and Naomi, that eventually came to an end. And the two sons, Mahlon and Kilion, they also died. Now, it is a very sad story when one by one the men died. The women are considered more helpless, and hence the law of God requires the society and the community of the Israelites take care of the poor and helpless, the widow and the orphans. And now Naomi is not only a widow, she is a widow with no sons. And in Jewish law, or in the Torah, they are not able to propagate, and they're not able now, if she were ever to go back, to take up the rights to the land that they had left. Now that is important, and without a son, there can be no inheritance in that sense, and so the inheritance will fall into the hands of the relatives to be taken care for the meantime. And so now the woman Naomi is survived by her two sons and husband, meaning she is the only one who is left remaining. Now, we spent some time just discussing how she wanted to go home because she had heard that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread, meaning there is now abundant food to eat. Now, when you talk about bread, it's about wheat. And they're able to harvest wheat and make into bread, and thereby have food and no more hungry. So famine is about hunger. And from where she was, as she was going home, so this is the picture of the conversation that we are eavesdropping into. They went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And so this is on the road to Judah, on the road to Judah. And so Naomi said to the two daughters-in-law, go and return to your mother's tent, your mother's house. And being so that the husbands have died, the men have died, the women can actually be free and remarry, and so to speak. And so Naomi blessed the two Moabite women. The Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt kindly with the dead and with me, meaning with the two husbands, the two men, and with me, the mother-in-law. They have been very kind, showing chesed. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband, meaning a blessing that they would actually find a good husband, a good home, and nestle into. Now, that's a very oriental thinking. It's not particularly a religious statement, but it is with the good intent of well wishes that you have a good home to marry into. And so kiss them, and they cried out, and they said, surely we will return. And this is where we left off. Surely we'll return with you to your people. And I had mentioned that this is very important, and as a springboard into where we are doing this evening, we would be Moabite. Your people, Israelite. Return, go back to the origins. And so it is about Naomi's people. Now, understand this statement itself, and we will use this as we begin our discussion. Moabite going into Israel and living with Israelites are it's very difficult. Israelite living in a Moabite environment is far easier. And understand the land itself, right? The land itself has the laws, customs, and practices, of which is foreign to most other nations, like Moab. It would be a burden upon them. And at the same time, the belief in God is very different. And so the Israelites is a very unique people in Exodus chapter 19. They are a holy nation, a nation that is very special. And we will not be able to appreciate its uniqueness until we read the book of Ruth, where a non-Israelite is wanting to join the Israelite nation. It is not, we can't read this text like a normal migration or normal immigration where you come from country A and now you want to reside in country B and you get permanent citizen status and things of that nature. We need to take that aspect and lay it aside, because the laws of the land of Israel is very different from our nations today. And the law of the land of Israel is a land belonging to God that has been given to Israel to occupy. And hence, my people, my land, my laws. And so God's land requires an observance of God's laws. And they don't know what they are asking in verse 10. So moving on to verse 11, you would see a very interesting dialogue that Naomi is pushing them back. Don't come. Don't join me. Don't join my people. Turn back. The word turn back is return, right? Return. Shuv. Right? It's like, shuv, my daughters. Shuv where? Return back to where you come from, to Moab. To Moab. Why will you go with me? And the idea of go is to walk. And this is important. Why will you walk with me? And I guess many of us would not ask this question. Why? What's the big deal of asking why. Is there, well, the fact that it exists in the text is that it's a big deal. Walking with Naomi back to Judah is a big deal. In fact, it's a very big deal, and we'll soon take a look at this. This, in effect, is a form of conversion from a person or a people of Moab who is not an Israelite to join Naomi to become part of the Israel nation, is what is typically called a conversion. And in most cases, they practice this idea of questioning, why do you want to join Israel as a nation? And so Naomi asks this. So this is one of those questions. Why? And then she tries to explain, are there still sons in my womb? Meaning, I'm not about to give birth, right? I don't have any more sons for you to marry, that they may be your husbands. To be your husbands means to become your man. My 2 sons already died. I've got nothing else in my bowels, in my womb, that you can actually marry. And it doesn't make any sense. If that be the case, I will still be in Moab. Verse 12, turn back, my daughters, go. Again, this is another pushback by Naomi. Shuv, return back to your land. Walk back. For I am too old to have a man. So she sees herself as old. And if I should say, I have hope. If I should have a husband tonight and should bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? Now, this is a very interesting expression. Why would Naomi speak about herself giving birth and then the daughters-in-law marrying the other sons? So this is a picture. This is part of Deuteronomy chapter 25. Deuteronomy chapter 25 is expressing this fact that if the eldest son doesn't have a offspring and he dies, then the daughter-in-law is to marry the next son and the next son, so that the name of the firstborn is maintained. And so that is the picture here. So if I have a husband tonight, if I have a man tonight, and give birth to sons. So having a husband tonight and give birth to sons is actually an A and a B. It is having a husband tonight is about giving birth to sons. This in this expression, okay? And the idea here is that even if she had sons, will you wait for them till they were grown to marry them? And then would you restrain yourself? The idea of restrain yourself is to shut up, that you will not have a man until then. Is that the case? Right? Is that the case? Verse 13 is, would you therefore wait, hope, what else? Expect. So this is a sense of anticipation, right? For them, until they were grown. And the word grown here is to grow up, to grow up. I guess to grow up, to have children, right? Will you shut up yourselves from having husbands? And this is a case to to shut up also has this connotation. Shut up from not having husbands, not having a man, right? That's what it means. Is this what you are prepared to do? And so she says, no, my daughters. No, my daughters. For it grieves me very much for your sakes. This is the intent. The idea here, grieve, is to be bitter, to be bitter. And she's very sorrowful. She is very sorrowful for your sakes, meaning from you, right? Looking at them having the willingness. But she concludes, the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. And this is something we need to express a little bit. The hand of the Lord is Yad Yehovah. Yad Yehovah represents the strike of God. The strike, or in modern day, a slap, right, has gone out against me. And she sees this. Now, this is a common Hebrew expression. If you recall in the book of Job, where he had lost everything, and the wife tells him to curse God and die, and he turns around and says, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Well, we know from the story, God didn't take from him, but it is ascribed to God. When you don't understand what is happening, they ascribe it to God, that there must be a reason. And that's how they would rationalize in ancient Israel days. And so here she says, the hand of God, God must have slapped me in some way, where my husband died, my children, my sons have died, and I'm not about to have kids anymore. And so there are no more offspring for my husband. And so she sees it as a terrible plague, as a plague. That's the statement here. And so you find again, they lifted their voices and wept. Remember, this is an A and a B. Raised their voices, made a lot of noise, and they lamented again, right? Again. And then Orpah, now this is what we read in this text. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Now, what does that mean? So let's understand this. In this case, when you kiss her, Naomi, it's goodbye, right? It's goodbye. It's a separation. So Orpah went back. That's what it means. Now, Ruth clung to her, and I'll give you this word. The word is cleave. And we read this word in Genesis 2, verse 24. And the man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. That's this word here. Meaning Ruth is prepared to be joined to Naomi in this relationship. That the man and the woman came together and cleaved together and clung together and became one flesh. And Ruth is now clinging on or cleaving to Naomi. Same concept as God wants Israel to cleave to him, to cling on to him, to depend on him, to have this closeness and intimate relationship between God and Israel. It's a concept of clinging or cleaving. So Ruth and Naomi is looking at this concept of clinging together, that they are be about one. That's the concept of this verse 14. And Naomi said, so it's always very important to look at the pronouns. So in verse 15, Naomi said, behold, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people. The word gone back is shuv, return, to her people and her gods, her Elohim. So understand the word Elohim is plural for El, the mighty one. And so it is used for the creator God in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. It is also used here for pagan gods, the gods of Moab. And so her people, her God, her gods, right? It's all part and parcel. And so return after your sister-in-law. Return is shuv. And so what can we see here are two things. One, when they were married, they were Moabite women. And they are not Israelites. The second thing we know from this statement is that they did not convert. When they did not convert, there is no obligation for them to return to Judah. And so they are to go back to Moab, and that's where they would live, and that's where it would be most convenient. That's the whole picture here, that Naomi is saying, go back. That's where your people are, and that's where your life is, your lifestyle, and you've got your gods there. So Ruth, you go. Don't cling to me. So you notice, why will you go with me? Right here as number one. Right here as number one. Why go with me? Number two, return after your sister-in-law, and that would be number two. This is a serious pushback by Naomi. Ruth, do not come. Do you know why you are doing this? Are you out of your mind? That would be a more modern way of saying things to Ruth. And now, understanding this background, that Naomi is very concerned that Ruth, being a Moabite woman, would not fit into the Israelite God, Israelite culture, and Israelite law of the land. That is what is entailed by joining to Naomi, that everything that Naomi is subjected to as a nation of Israel before God, in the land of God, under the laws of God, Ruth must oblige. And there is no exception. That's God's law. There is only one law for the natives and the ger, the visitors and the foreigners. Now, up till now, we know that Elimelech, Naomi, Mahlon, Kilion are all ger in the land of Moab. They are strangers there. And so if Ruth follows Naomi back, then Ruth will be a ger. She will be a stranger to the land of Israel. And that would be tough on her. So understand this. The second point is this. They did not convert. And now comes verse 16, the idea of conversion into the people of Israel. Observe, but Ruth said, very specific. Ruth is contending with Naomi. He says, entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following after you. Now, this is important. The word entreat here is really to, how should you say, to plead, or to intercede. The whole idea here is don't call me to leave you. I think that would be the picture. Do not tell me to leave you. Now, the idea of leave here is adzaf. Leave, forsake, what else? To depart, to neglect. All it's all there. You may recall in Psalms, I think Psalms 22, you would find these words. It says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" in the Psalms. And thereby, this word is important to understand that it's got broad usage. And Ruth is using this. Don't ask me to go away, right? Don't ask me to leave you or depart from you. The second statement is this. Don't ask me to shuv from following after you. Meaning from walking behind you. I think that would be a better word, of walking behind you. All right. So for walking behind you. What do you mean by walking behind? Now, in the Hebrew context, very similar to Oriental thinking. When you are walking behind somebody, you are following the footsteps of that person. So now we have an A and a B. That leaving and turning back from following, turning from following, is actually the same thing. And Ruth is saying, don't do this. Don't do this. Which means that I am not abandoning you. I'm not neglecting you. I don't stop me from walking where you walk. And that's the meaning, following after you, walking where you walk, right? Where you walk. Now comes the important words that we need to spend some time on. The important words comes this way. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people, my people. Your God, my God. You die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Now, there are a number of instances here that we need to understand. So this is taken as a point of conversion, that Ruth is now confessing willingly, to the point where she is going against the wishes of Naomi to go back. She's saying, no, I am following. And the confession comes this way. Quite interesting. And you will see it this way. Say, wherever you go, I will go. You here would be Naomi, right? Naomi, your people, you. And as an Israelite woman, and then obviously Ruth will have to be following in the woman's footsteps, there are places that a woman cannot go. You can see that. This is Naomi. So where you go, where you can go, where you can lawfully be, then I will also do that. And so I will follow your laws so that I comply exactly what you can do. So can I. The next one is where you lodge. Now, the word lodge here comes from a word is to stay overnight. Right? Stay overnight. To spend the night. Well, I could say spend the night. And in so doing, you would find that there are places where, as a woman, you cannot spend the night in places where it is prohibited, especially in a secluded place where a male is not your husband. And so that's a prohibition. And Ruth is saying, where you can spend the night, I will spend the night as well, because I will follow you. I'm no longer going to follow the customs of my people, the Moabites. All right. And then it says, your people, the Israelites, shall be my people. And the idea here is to say that, well, your people are governed by the laws of God. And if that be so, then I will also adhere to the same laws to become your people. This is about abiding by the laws of God. It is very different because Israel is a holy nation, a unique nation, where they observe the laws of God. They will be seen as a very special, a very different nation by the people around them. And that they will be called wise because they know things that other nations don't. And they have a living God amongst them. And so that is a picture. And so if your people observe the laws of God, they will also be my people because I will also observe the same laws that God has given upon the nation of Israel. Next, your God, my God. What's so special about that? There are so many gods, and Moabites have many gods. And so in so doing, Exodus chapter 20, right? There is no idolatry. You shall have no other gods before me. And so no idolatry. That's a prohibition. There's only one God, one true and living God. And Ruth says, sure, your God, my God, one God and no others. You shall have no other gods before me. And she said yes to that. Verse 17, where you die, I will die. Now, there are certain laws in transgression. And they list 4 types of death penalty that you can be stoned, be burned, have your head cut off, or strangled. And the idea here is there are laws that will take a life. And if you are subjected to those laws that will lead to death, so shall I. And these are what I could say death punishments. It is not about merely dying a natural death. If there are laws that will cause one to be subjected to, and it's a death penalty, so will I be subjected to. Because there is no meaning to say where you die, I die. The intent is where a person dies is determined and where the person is buried is determined by how one dies. Now, this is a law of God that was given to Israel, that if they die, how should you say, if they die by death penalty, right? If they die by death penalty, then they are buried in a different place. If they die honorably, then they are buried at a different place. And so not only Ruth is subjected to the death punishments, she is also subjected also to the place where she would be buried, given the condition of the death. All of these is a concern to Oriental. Now, what do you mean concern to Oriental? It concerns the Oriental culture in that area, because life and death is very particular and it needs to be honorable. And each culture of the land has their own practices. And in Israel, the practice is governed by God's laws. Basically, that's what is being said, that Ruth is now leaving the Moabite environment and laws and culture and people, and she is now following the footsteps of Naomi back to the land of Israel in Judah, to go where she goes, where she puts up overnight. And Ruth is willing to do that, to be subjected to the restrictions and prohibitions of God. That's basically what is expressed in these phrases. And the Lord do so to me and more also. And whatever that is required, that is what it means, right? This is what it means. And that if the Lord do so to me, as Naomi has said that the Lord's hand is on me, then so be it. And this would be seen as if God punishes. Because Naomi saw the hand of God is against her. And so Ruth said, if the Lord does that to me and even more, so be it. That's how it is read, right? That's how it is read. And if there is more that God is doing, so be it. So be it. But between you and me, death parts. Death will divide us. And this is an incredible relationship confession. Death, we know, right? When the person dies, and this is between you and me, Ruth and Naomi. This is between you, Naomi, and Ruth. This is the meaning of cleave. This is the meaning of cleave or cling, where the man clings to the woman and the woman clings to the man. When God wants Israel to cling to God until death parts, or death will divide them, which means all the way. And that is verse 17. That is a very clear statement. Verse 18, when she, this is Naomi, she saw. Now understand, it is about looking, it's very visual. There's nothing in the heart. So there is the expressions, the words, the facials, the body language, whatever that we today think of, that she was determined to go with her. The word she was determined to go with her comes from a word to make herself strong. That's the word determined. To make herself strong, to strengthen herself, to persist, I think is a good word. To walk, this is walk, together with her. So this is Ruth. Then she stopped speaking to her. What does that mean? She is Naomi. She ceased. And that is the word. She ceased. She ceased discussing this. This is davar. This is about this matter with Ruth. So the matter is over, which means that Naomi accepts, based on the confession of Ruth, that is exactly what she wants, and it is not a whim and fancy. It's not emotional. It's not pity. It's nothing of that nature. And so the idea of a non-Israelite converting into the Israel nation, joining the Israel nation. So maybe you don't want to use the word convert. Joining the Israel nation is to be part of the nation where God is the true and living God, and under the laws of God, and to live and practice and obey exactly like one of the natives. That is what it entails for Ruth. And Ruth strengthened herself, and thereby it's seen, right? It's visual. And Naomi said, good, okay, fine. No more discussion. End of discussion. Verse 19, now the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. Remember, Ephrath, right? And what happened when they came to Bethlehem? This is interesting. All the city was excited because of them. Now, all the city, it means that the whole town. The whole town. The idea of excited is what was in a stir. In a stir, there was a lot of what should we say? Agitated. And I think this would be in a good sense, right? Agitated in a good sense. Lots of noise, and the whole town came to them, right? Upon them, because of them. And the women of the town asked. Now, we don't know how many years have passed since the beginning part of chapter 1, but we do see that it must have been a considerable length of time where Elimelech first died in a first period of time, and then the two sons married Moabite women and stayed there for another 10 years. So we are talking easily 10, 20 years. And so they asked, so Naomi, or is this Naomi? And they were all wondering. Because after 20 years, you could say that maybe a generation have passed. Now, verse 20 starts this. It says, do not call me Naomi. Do not call me Naomi. The word Naomi literally means kindness, delight. And so Naomi is my kindness or my delight, my splendor, and I would say my beauty. All of these are good good words to describe Naomi. So she must have been very beautiful. She has been very kind. She's very delightful. And so she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Mara. Mara is bitter. If you notice the idea of, how should we say, bitter water. In Exodus chapter 15, there was bitter water. And so the word Mara is that same word, bitter. Call me bitter. And I guess the idea here of being bitter is a description of her life, right? Is a description of her life. And so she says, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. What did she mean, right? And so do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. And we said here that this whole thing here is Almighty is Shaddai. Shaddai has dealt, I guess, has been bitter, right? I guess that would be a word, has been bitter to me. Very bitter, in fact. And the idea of bitter is the concept of, how should we say, it is very grievous. I think that would be an idea. Very grieved. She's very grieved. She has nothing left. That's what she's saying. It used to be very pleasant life. There was a kindness with my life. I had a husband. I had 2 sons. Now I have nothing. And so remember what I said earlier, that the ancient Hebrew loved to ascribe to God, that God has dealt this with me. Now, did God take the husband and the sons? We don't know, but that is how she is expressing it. If that's the case, and that leads a lot of the Jewish commentators saying that, well, Elimelech must have done something and the retribution is upon him and the sons. And so Naomi is now recounting what has happened, that I am now Mara. It is a very sad life. And so she expressed, I went out full, meaning I walked away very full. The idea of full is, is in fullness. What do you mean in fullness? Now, in the Hebrew Oriental culture, fullness for a woman would mean that you have a husband and you have sons. Right? Oriental culture is all about sons. And so she is saying, the Lord has brought me home again, but this time empty. And in this case, the word empty is, I guess empty, a void, empty hands. That's the picture. Rekam, right? Empty hands. And so she asks, why do you call me Naomi, since Jehovah has testified against me? The word testify literally means spoken. I guess you can use the word answered. The word God has responded by afflicting me. Now, the word afflict me is a very interesting word. It is to cause evil or hurt or grief. Right? This is the word. Has afflicted me. And again, you notice that the Hebrew people love to ascribe things to God, especially when they don't understand. And so she says, I'm no longer delightful. Naomi does not mean anything. Naam, right? Naomi doesn't mean anything. My name is meaningless because God has done something, acted against me, and afflicted me. So this is an A and a B. This statement and this statement is the same. God has responded to me and God has shown me evil. Now understand that I kept describing the idea of evil is actually seen in the eyes of the beholder. In the eyes of Naomi, what has happened is evil, is grievous, it's not good, it's not delightful, it's not expected, not what she hoped for. And that's called evil. Right? And that's how she is relating or recounting this story. And so Naomi returned. So this is part and parcel of the narrative. Return means shuv. And Ruth, the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law with her, two hand in hand, who returned from the plains of Moab or the open field of Moab. So the idea of return is very important that we understand. This is a concept of repent, to go back to where you were. You were right with God, you've gone away from God, now you return back to God, and that is a visual imagery. And so we have seen many of these words, shuv, in this chapter 1. And when they're back, they came to Bethlehem. And it is at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now in verse 22, the barley harvest is actually I would say in the month of Aviv, right? Or the month of Nisan. And that is the first month of the year. And that is the harvest of the barley. And remember that in the book of Leviticus, on the day after the main Sabbath of the Passover, they had the feast of the first fruits, and they have a wave offering of the barley harvest that was identified as first fruits to be offered to God. This is that same barley harvest that we're talking about, and that's how we know that it's a month of Nisan, which is the first month of the year where they left Egypt. And so now Naomi and Ruth has returned to the land of Judah in the city of Bethlehem, right? The house of bread, very apt. And they are now having bread harvest of barley. And so with this, we come to the end of chapter 1.